Welcome to the Girls Marketing Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing and the perfect backing track to your workday. Every week, we get up close and personal with marketers revolutionising the industry so you can learn from the best in the game. From the latest marketing trends to building a successful marketing career, no topic is off limits. At Girls in Marketing, we champion progress, inspire change, and encourage women to take the marketing world by storm. Check out our website and membership to learn more and get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle. Right, let's dive into another episode together. Welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Today, we have a super exciting guest from one of the best SEO communities joining us. Before we jump into the episode, please do us a favour and like this episode and follow our podcast. It helps us out more than you can imagine and means that we can continue to get great guests onto the podcast. Today's guest is Areej AbuAli, founder of Women in Tech SEO, who is changing the game for so many women in marketing. She's worked with some amazing brands, including Zoopla and Papier, and is now dedicating her career to helping women in tech SEO hone their craft. This episode is a great one for all of you interested in SEO. Enjoy the episodes. So welcome to the podcast, Areej. So nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to jump in. I want to start by talking about how you discovered marketing. So cast your brain back. How did you discover marketing and what made you love the industry?
Yeah, so I studied computer engineering back home in Egypt. And I think my favorite subjects were probably like math and physics. And I was very, very into that. And then I moved to the UK around a decade ago, right after I'd done my degree, to do like a master's degree. And it was a master's in business information technology. And one of my favorite subjects was around marketing and digital marketing, and kind of introduced me to some of these concepts that I didn't know about at all. I did a few internships while I was studying my master's degree and kind of started learning more about, well, what is it? What is SEO, search engine optimization, and so forth. I felt that with certain sectors in digital marketing, they had this nice, almost like it was like a bridge between both computing and marketing. And so, yeah, that's kind of what drew me into it. But actually, my first job right after I graduated was purely because it was a marketing agency, but they hired me because my first language is Arabic, and they had an Arabic client, and that was the only reason I got that job. And then somehow I just ended up falling into this career of SEO since then.
Yeah, that's amazing though. I speak to so many people when they talk about English being like the second language or something, and I say to them, so that's like, not, I hate the word like a superpower, but genuinely in the UK, sometimes like people need those who speak other languages. And I think that especially when you're more junior, you kind of think that it's like a negative thing. You know, maybe you could speak French or German or something like that. There's so many companies who actually need people who speak those languages. Yeah. I tell people that all the time. So it's so nice to hear that was an opportunity for you.
Yeah, it was a massive opportunity. And actually within that, it was quite a small agency, but they had a very big Scandinavian team, for example, because they worked with a lot of different Scandinavian clients. And so they hired people who were fresh out of, just starting out there in the job market, but purely because, they were fluent in these specific languages and they understood the culture behind them as well.
Yeah, that's nice. So talk me through a little bit about your career then. So obviously you joined this agency. Yeah. What kind of happened from there?
Yeah, so I initially started, I think they put me in the content team purely because of my Arabic language. And then within a month, they were like, no, Areej, we need to switch you to Technical SEO. That kind of feels more like you. And I'm so glad they did, because it was, something about it it drew me to it. I was interested a lot more in kind of exploring that. And so I was agency side for maybe a little over 5 years. And something I always tell a lot of people kind of starting out in digital marketing is it is very helpful to start out agency side, because you do get exposed a lot to different industries and different websites and different clients. And you get to learn a lot of these different skills of not just, working in marketing, but also working across different clients. And then after 5 years of doing that, I then moved in-house, where I worked with Zoopla. I head up their SEO team there. And then afterwards, I moved to Papier, who are like an online e-commerce. So it was a massive transition, I'd say, moving from agency to in-house, because it's almost like the skill set needed is completely different. I wasn't doing as much as SEO as I was agency side. Instead, a lot of the focus was more on stakeholder management and how do you convince, budget holders to invest in this and to prioritize things and so forth. And then I went on maternity leave. And I was like, okay, that's it. I want to be my own boss. I don't really want to go back to a 9-to-5 job. I want to work for myself. And so I then made the decision to kind of start consulting and working for myself, having my own clients and so on.
Did you know that 44% of full-time workers say they have a side hustle or passion project? Have you got that burning idea to start a passion project but no idea where to start? Don't worry, you're not alone. Hostinger is a sponsor of our podcast, and Hostinger's new AI website builder tool lets you start a website super easily with zero coding skills required. Just write 3 sentences to sum up what you're looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. Start your passion project with Hostinger by heading to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing and use our exclusive code girlsinmarketing for 10% off your plan. You never know where your passion project might take you. So you said obviously the jump from kind of agency to in-house is like quite a lot. What would you say are the kind of skills that you need for either or for both? Because I definitely agree, and I speak to a lot of people who think the same in terms of like skills and stuff like that. Yeah,
I think agency side, like there has to be this flexibility. You're jumping on a lot of different, clients and websites, and there's a lot of it's like you're needing to do so much like in parallel, and so that can there's a lot you learn from that, but it can also feel a little bit overwhelming. You have to be really good with like time management and project management and stuff like that. And you get to learn from people. You tend to have a bigger team, so you get to learn a lot from the people you work with, but also from the clients that you deal with. And then in-house feels very different, where especially like in digital marketing and SEO, there might be a lot of in-house teams that are fairly small. So it's very common for you to be the only one, or for it to just be you and another person. And at that point, you tend to be very embedded in the marketing team as a whole. And so you learn so much about working with PR and working with content and working with design. And then at the same time, it's about, stakeholder management and how can you work with the tech team and the engineers and the product team. And I think majority of my time in-house was probably spent in meetings, unfortunately, but there's definitely like a lot that I learned from, how to talk to senior stakeholders and how to get sign off on stuff. And it was like a whole new skill set that I didn't grasp at all when I was agency side.
Yeah. Would you say then that is because the companies that you work for were quite big companies, or because I know that when maybe if it's a smaller company in-house, then there's still that stakeholder management, but maybe not as much collaboration. I speak to a lot of people who lack collaboration. I don't know if that's due to the size of the organization or if it's more due to just the organization itself.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So, and I also think it's about where you fit in that organization. So with SEO, it's very common for us to fall under marketing. And that was the case when I was with Zoopla. But actually, a lot of the work that needed to be done required engineering support. And so a lot of the time was spent talking to engineers and product managers and trying to get like the CTO on board for stuff. But then when I moved to Papier, it was very different. It was a lot more of a smaller setup. And actually, I sat in the tech team there. And so that was, it was just such a new thing for me where, oh, wow, I'm in the same team with people who I need their support in getting stuff implemented. And everything was moving so much faster then. But then at the same time, I did feel very separated from marketing. And so when I needed to work with marketing on things like PR campaigns or so on, it was again like a little bit challenging there. So I think a lot of it definitely comes from where you are sitting and where you are positioned. SEO always tends to be one of those things where, it might, I don't know, they kind of trial and experiment where it might best fit within an organization, because you kind of do fit a little bit everywhere. And so there's a lot you can learn by sitting in these different departments.
Yeah. So let's define SEO and Tech SEO, because there are quite a lot of people who listen to podcasts who are more aspiring or junior and might not really be familiar. And I want to dive deeper into SEO and Tech SEO with you. But I'm aware that we need to cover the basics first. So would you be able to give a definition, like in your own words, of SEO and then also Tech SEO as well?
Yeah. So with SEO, it's helping websites rank better on Google. So let's say I'm searching for a specific type of dress to buy. And so I Google that, and then there's a number of websites that rank for that. And I choose, okay, this one looks relevant to what it is that I'm searching. Or, you're looking for flights to travel somewhere or a hotel to stay somewhere and so on. Technical SEO, I would say the cool thing about it is it's like your foundation. For a website to rank on Google or on any search engine, it needs to actually properly function. It needs to be built in a way where Google can read it, understand it, and know what is it exactly on the page and what does it need to rank for. And so as technical SEOs, what we spend a lot of our time doing is kind of ironing out all those little bits and pieces of technical issues that might be happening on the website, making sure we give those recommendations across so that they are fixed by the engineers. And so then it helps our websites rank better.
Yeah. I speak to so many people who think SEO is just like writing blogs. And I feel like when you actually understand Tech SEO, as you said, that's the foundational knowledge. And I say to so many people, there's no point in writing blogs if your website's not indexed. There's literally no point because no one's seeing them. So I think, sometimes it's obviously we laugh about it, but also it's quite serious because people don't really understand that foundational piece, really. Would you say then, I don't know if this is a bold statement, that Tech SEO is like underpins like a successful SEO strategy?
I would definitely say it's the backbone of SEO and the backbone of your website. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's one of those things where we might be writing the most amazing content in the world, but if Google does not understand our website and so cannot crawl it, index it, and therefore rank it, it will never read this amazing content that we're writing. So yes, it's definitely one of those things where it's like you need to get that ironed out first before you then move on and you start writing awesome, content or building awesome links or getting coverage and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you've worked with some amazing brands like Zoopla and Papier. Tell me a little bit about the Tech SEO like practices that you put in place for those kind of brands.
Yeah, so for Zoopla, it was really fun. I mean, Zoopla is a massive, massive website because they are, they're a property aggregator site. And so the way they work is you go in, anyone goes in, they search a specific postcode, city, location, and because they want to see what are the different properties there, either for sale or to rent. And so what that means is think about every single postcode in the UK. That's like, hundreds and millions of pages. So how is it that you go about fixing a website technically that has millions and millions of pages? So it was definitely a challenge, but there's a lot I learned off the back of it. And there's a lot of legacy code in there because it's a fairly old website as well. So there was definitely a lot of work to do around understanding the different templates that make it up and knowing how it's almost like, what do we prioritize? Because there might be a list of 100 things that can be done, but it's usually like 2 or 3 things that really move the needle. And so a lot of the time we spent was focusing on, well, what are the pages that we want to prioritize for Google to crawl and index? Because yes, there are hundreds of millions of pages, but they're not all equally important. So how do we define those very important pages and make sure that those are the ones that get a lot of attention and love? So that's kind of what we spent a lot of our time on at Zoopla. And then with Papier, it's e-commerce. So it's a very different. With e-commerce, it's almost like it's the opposite, where it's like we want it to rank for as much potential as we can, especially with, so they sell stationery, and there's a lot of different, like what you would call long tail filters. So for example, the majority of people won't just search notebooks. They'll search a specific colored notebook or a line notebook or different types. So how is it that we can ensure that Google can see and understand all of these different filters Yeah, so both were like a very cool challenge to work on, and they felt like they were kind of contradicted one another. Where with one it was like, oh, we need less pages; with another, we need more pages. But definitely like tons to learn, and I find that stuff really fun.
Yeah. So with Zoopla, you said obviously it being an older website. Do you think that was in Zoopla's favour that it was an older website? Because I speak to a lot of people who say we've got like a really old website, but we want to do like a certain strategy. Is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing, or does it not really matter?
So it's a really good thing from a branding perspective for sure. Like Google knows and trusts this domain. It's existed for a very, very long time. It's a massive, well-known brand that gets coverage from lots of big publications. So all that stuff is definitely in its good favor. The bad stuff is kind of like the back end of what's happening with the code. If you have a site that's existed for like 20 years or so on, you're like, oh no, you've had different pieces of code written here and there and kind of jumbled on one another. And so when you're every single time we wanted to do, like, it might feel like the smallest change ever. It is not that easy or that simple at all to get those changes implemented because of all of that legacy code. So yeah, there's definitely like good and bad that comes there.
Yeah. So on the opposite side, we've got like brand new websites. What would you say is like one of the first steps? So say someone out there is listening and they're like, I want to start doing something with like a tech SEO, SEO strategy. What would you say is like the first step? Like if you were going to say there was a step for someone to take?
Yeah, I think the first step is to understand the different templates of your site. We might step back and say, oh, we have 5,000 pages on this website, but actually it's not 5,000 pages. It's your homepage, it's your product page, it's your article page, it's your, I don't know, like another type of filter page. And so when you understand and approach your website as these are my 4 different templates, and this is what I need to optimize and do about each one, everything becomes so much easier. And at that point, you're focusing on the things that matter. I feel I probably did this mistake a lot when I was starting out initially, where I would look at a site and I would get so overwhelmed by its size. And I would try to nitpick and fix things on a page-by-page basis. And it was probably me transitioning from agency to in-house where I kind of started understanding that it's not about that. It's about understand and define what your main templates are, and then find fixes in each and start focusing on that.
Yeah, so like higher level stuff and then go deeper.
Yep.
I do think that it's an underlying thing with so many marketers that we do get really stuck in like the day-to-day and the nitty-gritty of stuff. Like when actually it's that higher level stuff that's really going to build the processes out. And I think, I don't know if you all agree, but with SEO, like processes are so key in order to succeed.
Yeah, processes and prioritization, I would say. I think with a lot of that stuff as well, we might go in and say, oh, this needs to be done and this needs to be done now. But it's like, well, we need to kind of think about both impact and effort. So something might have high impact for SEO, but the effort might be extremely high from a technical perspective for it to be implemented. In which case, is this really the best? Is this really what we should be spending time and resource on? Or should we instead, for example, look for something that will have a medium impact, but is very, very low effort, so can get done much quicker? So I think that's probably another thing that I learned as well, like after a few years of working in SEO, where it's like it would be amazing for us to get every single thing we need done, but we really need to kind of sit down and make sure we're prioritizing it properly.
Yeah, I love the idea of like impact and effort. And I think that not even for SEO, for any type of marketing, always thinking about what's the impact of this and what's the effort of this. As you said, if something's like medium, like it's low effort, but medium impact, like that is really good, as opposed to the high impact stuff that's maybe also high effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I would love to talk then. So obviously you've done agency, you've done in-house, and then now you've consulted. So that transition again is different.
Yeah.
How was that transition from, agency, in-house, and then consulting?
I think it was terrifying. I think this stuff can be really, really scary. I mean, you kind of leave behind the stability of your 9 to 5, of your, of getting a set salary every single month, of having sick leave, of having holiday, of all of that. And you kind of like start working for yourself. And when I first did it, I was like, I'm going to give myself 6 months. If this doesn't work out, I'm going to start looking for jobs again. And of course I did it with a whole like forecasted sheet of savings and expenses, and I did like the whole plan because I am a planner and I do overthink everything. And then I think it's been a year and a half now, and it's okay. I'm still going. I think the thing that was very fun about it is you get to choose who you want to work with and how you want to work with it. And especially when you're agency side, you don't really get a say. You might work for specific clients or industries that you're not interested in, or they're not aligned with your values, for example. Or within house, you tend to be very fixated and stuck on that one thing. So you might feel like, oh no, I'm getting a little bit rusty because I'm only working on this industry. But then when you're consulting or you've got your own clients, then it's a whole, it's a very exciting world because you get to choose and decide what it is that you want to work with, and you might choose a specific niche. So let's say, for example, you might say, I only want to work with e-commerce clients, or you might decide I want to work with, smaller businesses or just SaaS or so forth. So that's, I found that really, really cool, and kind of giving your time to see what it is that you enjoy the most and what it is that you want to work on.
Do you feel like consulting has made you find that, like, what you actually enjoy working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I don't know, funny enough, I found it really interesting how there's a lot about it where it can feel a little bit lonely because you're used to working with a team, but then at the same time, you do realize a lot about what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. There's initially the first few months, there's the scare off. I'm going to say yes to absolutely everything because I'm so worried that, I'm not going to get clients and so forth. And then after some time, when you start building that confidence and building a network and having good relations, you then start realizing, oh, this piece of project is what I enjoyed the most. And this type of, let's say, I don't know, some people do, for example, project-based or retainer-based or so on. You just come to grasp to, oh, what is it that you enjoy working on? So I think there's a lot to learn, but it's probably what I've enjoyed doing the most so far in like the past decade of my work.
Yeah. And it's something that you learn a lot about yourself as well. I think being able to work for yourself, you get to understand, when you're most productive, or like, as you say, the types of people that you want to work with, type of people that you don't want to work with. And I think that that's obviously a privilege to be able to say, I'm allowed to work with who I want to work with.
100%.
Obviously with agency side, especially, you can't always dictate that, can you? So that's like really interesting because I think a lot of people probably want to go into that. But equally, we have a lot of people who listen who are like one-person marketing teams, or they work a lot with consultants. So how do you work with businesses then? Like, in what capacity? Because I think in different industries, consultant as a word means a lot of different things, doesn't it? So how do you kind of work with people and with businesses?
Yeah. So I like my preference is to, it's almost like embed yourself within a team. And just make sure that you have a very specific project scope from the start, where I prefer shorter term projects where it's like, okay, in 3 months, these are going to be our deliverables. This is what we're going to work on. This is what we're going to be, focusing on. And so you kind of have those set deliverables from the start that you've agreed on, and you have these different check-in times throughout that period where, okay, here's where we're at. This is what we've done so far. This is what's left. This is what needs to be done. And then during that time, it's almost like it's, instead of, let's say it's the CMO who brought you in, but it's not really the CMO that you continue having the conversations with. It's like the marketing manager, and it's the product manager, and it's their tech lead. It's those people that they're the ones who are going to have to kind of ensure that a lot of the work gets done and implemented. Those are the ones that you kind of build those relationships with. So it does, I would say it feels very similar to how things were set up when I was in-house. But of course, because it's very, very short term. So you kind of need to make sure that you're making the most out of the time. I did work on some projects where there was this expectation of, oh, we would love for you to be doing, I don't know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, for example. But that's not really why I want to work for myself. I do prefer the flexibility of, as long as we've got stuff agreed, then I can do things in my own time. And as long as we make sure there's like really good comms between us and we're kind of updating each other on where things are at, that's usually my preference in terms of ways of working.
I would love to talk about women in tech SEO because we spoke about Tech SEO. Let's leave that now. Let's park that. Let's talk about community.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about Women in Tech SEO and the community, why you founded it, like your story from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I founded Women in Tech SEO. We're turning 5 years next month, which is very, very exciting. And it was probably like during a time in my career where I was starting to feel like really demotivated. I used to go and attend a lot of conferences and I wouldn't know anyone who's there. And I never, ever, ever felt like I would ever have the confidence to go on the stage and speak myself, mainly because I never felt represented on the stage. And so it was always like, well, where are my people? And a lot of people, when they say, oh, how come you started Women in Tech SEO? My really honest answer is always, it was very selfish reasons, because I needed to connect with people that I can relate with and people where, and just be part of something where I feel like I belonged. And after a few years of being in SEO, I didn't have that feeling. And so I just decided to, start my own group. And I think initially it was just, I put out a tweet where I think I put together like a Facebook group, and the whole purpose was we were going to do like small local meetups in London. And that's how it kind of started.
Yeah. Why do you feel like then, do you think it was regarding the SEO industry that you didn't feel represented when you went to like conferences and stuff like that? Because obviously there's got to be a need for you to want to do something. Is it that there was like a problem with the industry, or do you think it was just more the space wasn't there?
I think, firstly, I think it was technical SEO more than SEO for sure, where it was, I remember in a lot of conferences that have parallel tracks, the technical SEO track, which I was the most interested in because this is what I worked in, I would always attend this and it would always have an all male lineup. Like that was just the normal. And I was always like, but where are the women technical SEOs? Because I'm a tech SEO and I'm a woman. I'm sure there are others. So I definitely think it was related to that. The other thing that I also noticed very early on, there's almost like this exclusivity around, there was an exclusivity around like communities and groups and so forth, where you would hear about all this closed Facebook group that's only welcoming, of people who have spoken before, been on stages, or leaders of agency or And it was always like, well, how do I get access to this? And how come, what is it about them that makes them like all closed up? So I think it was like a combination of both, where it's like, well, where are the other technical SEOs out there, and how is it that you can make a group where it doesn't matter if someone is brand new in the industry, even someone who just still wants to learn about it, and at the same time in the same group have someone who's been in this industry for over a decade.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is, I mean, I would say it's not as much of an issue now as it probably was a few years ago. Yeah. But it's that idea of like exclusivity that always, I mean, it quite annoys me, because it's people who are in higher up positions that, they have done amazing in their careers, like fair enough. But I think it's kind of like giving other people space to do so. Yep. And I love that, communities like Women in Tech SEO is changing that narrative and kind of like bringing forth that. And I think actually communities like Girls in Marketing, like Women in Tech SEO, are really helping to change that narrative around the exclusivity and like all of that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say has been like a highlight of Women in Tech SEO so far?
I mean, I think the whole thing has been, I feel very, I don't know, I feel very, very humble to think about how, 5 years ago, it was just this idea, put together the small Facebook group. We had our first coffee meetup where it was like 10 of us showed up. And then, now like 5 years later, it is pretty much a full-time business where we're able to hire people, and we're able to do conferences in different parts of the world. And, we have like thousands of members, and we run different initiatives. And it's very difficult for me to comprehend how that has happened, because especially for, I would say, the first 3 or 4 years of running it, it was always like a side passion project for me, where I would, it was like my weekends and my evenings alongside a full-time job. And probably I wouldn't have had the courage to decide, well, I'm going to do my own thing. I probably wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for everything I learned through running the community, but also through all the people and the network that I myself made through that.
Yeah. What has the network been like? Like, do you feel so supported now?
Yeah.
Obviously, before you did it and then versus now.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even. I can't even put to words or like describe how it is now. Where it's. I remember, for example, when I first decided to make the jump to stop working for companies and work for myself, I had a few calls with founders in the community who have already been doing their own thing for a while, and the amount of just the advice and the support and the motivation you get from speaking to people who started, who just have very similar backgrounds and similar stories is massive. And we had, I mean, even just thinking about the community itself and some of the members in it, we have members who met through the community and decided to be like co-founders and go and start their own agencies and their own companies. Like, I think some of that stuff is probably like massive, like the biggest highlights when you kind of think about what happens when you kind of almost like, and so much about this, but it's like how much when you foster a group, you're there, you kind of help them connect with one another, and then like the magic happens from there. And it's just it's so beautiful to see.
It's, for me, what happens behind closed doors. And sometimes I think, I mean, I don't even realize this, so I'm sure every founder of a community is the same. Sometimes people have said to me, I've met so and so who, as you say, is like now my best friend, or is, I'm doing this thing with them. And I think that's so nice, because that's the idea of community, is to facilitate that. And something that I'm huge on, like, I never wanted it to be about me. I wanted it to be about like creating a space that I was a part of. And obviously I, like, similar to you, was part of that, but it wasn't about me as a person. So I absolutely love that. What would you say has been like a biggest lesson then? So obviously biggest highlight is basically everything. But what's like a lesson that you've learned from kind of building the community?
I think it definitely comes with, like, there's a lot of challenges and things that you learn along the way. It probably took me a while to realize the importance of having a solid code of conduct in place. You kind of start something and you have this ego of course it's going to be beautiful and amazing and everyone is going to be absolutely wonderful. And that's the case like 99% of the time. But then it's that 1% that when something goes wrong, and it's almost like, oh, in hindsight, I should have done this, or I should have said this, or we should have had these rules in place in the first place, or so on. And you kind of, you beat yourself up, but it's okay. It's like a massive learning, because probably if nothing had went wrong in the first place, you wouldn't have been like, oh, now we need to have a solid code of conduct. We need to include this. We need to make sure these rules are there. We need to not only tell our new members about it, but also remind our current members about it. So I think that's probably one of the things where there's a little bit of ego that comes like in the first few years of, especially if something feels smooth sailing, but then when something goes wrong, you're like, oh no, how did I not think about this in the first place? So something I mean, this is probably something I talk a lot with like new community builders now, where I'm like, make sure you have a solid code of conduct and make sure you have it like very, very early on. Don't leave it too late, because it does dictate, and it does like it kind of helps hold your community together.
What would you say is important with like codes of conduct then? Is there like a key thing that you would say, if someone did want to create a code of conduct as building a community?
So I think like making sure that your values are aligned, like and are, it's not just about, put a list of 5 rules, but it's also about kind of speaking of the values behind these rules and explaining why they're important. So for example, we say a lot like our values are, we are to be kind, we are a judgment-free zone, so when we define some of these rules, we need to explain like how they tie to some of these values. I think the other thing as well is, a code of conduct doesn't need to be written once and just once. It's one of those things where it's like you're constantly revisiting it and relearning, and there's new things that might come up that makes you realize, oh, we need to get this updated, or we need to also add this in. And so it's like, it's a learning process, but also getting that feedback specifically from your community members is really important. Every now and then I might have someone ping me in and say, oh, I didn't feel too comfortable in that conversation, or I wasn't too sure how to reply back or how to handle it. And that's a really good time to kind of assess, well, is this reflected in our code of conduct, and should we? So make sure that you're involving your community members in the process as well, and it's not just a dictatorship where you're kind of like, this is how it is, and that's that.
I think feedback is so key. Even away from community, like customer feedback. I mean, it's all the same, isn't it? I think so often people forget about feedback, and it's almost like annoying as a marketer to be like, why are you not taking in consideration like feedback and stuff like that? So I definitely agree with that 100%. you obviously built Women in Tech SEO off the back of like a problem, the fact that you didn't feel represented, lack of motivation. Let's say someone wants to create a community, you know, from a problem. How do people even go about doing that? Like, what are even the starting point for doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, like, kind of look around initially. If you can't find a community that already exists that fixes what you're looking for, then I definitely encourage you to create your own. And my first advice is always, like, in terms of like getting those first people through the door, is talk to people you love and trust already. There's no reason to kind of put a big public shout out to try to get, complete strangers through the door. I think the first few days, weeks, month, you probably want a few familiar faces in there, because it's just going to make you feel a lot better having people that you kind of know and having that inner circle. So don't get too fixated about platforms and tech and and go on about, should it be a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or a Slack or so on. Don't worry about the stuff. Like, it's going to come, and you can always, none of this stuff needs to be set in stone. You can change it down the line, but kind of work on getting those first few people through the door. Have genuine conversations with them where you understand what it is that interests you all, what it is that brought you all together in one place. And, how can you make this a place where you all feel happy and supported and safe? And then just foster that quality of conversation, and don't get fixated or worry at all about quantity of numbers. Like, I think as marketers in general, that's just such a thing for us, where it's like, we had month on month and year on year growth of I don't know what. But it's like, no, never mind that. Just let's focus on the quality of conversation and engagement that's happening. Everything else will come organically off the back of that.
And I think that's so important, and people often forget about that when it comes to community. And I mean, what I did with Girls in Marketing is I kind of did what you said, like prove concept before figuring out the tech. So, we only built our membership like 2 years after I started Girls in Marketing. A lot of it was like the Facebook group, and then kind of talking to people, getting people on board, like with the mission first. Because I think for me, it was so important to prove the concept, because obviously, like, if you feel a certain way, so, with you, like lack of representation, motivation, and obviously if you feel like that, other people will feel like that, but you don't know that for certain. And sometimes things exist or don't exist for a reason. So I think it's about proving that concept, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah. How do you kind of then maintain that personalization? When you do grow, obviously we're saying it's quality over quantity, 100%. And I agree with that. But as you grow, because you're at like 8,000 members or something like that now, crazy. How do you maintain that personalization to make everyone feel special? Sounds strange, but that sort of thing, that you've got that relationship with them.
I think that's an excellent question, and that's probably something I struggle with all the time, to be honest, because it's like, well, how can you make everyone feel special? You want everyone to feel special. We do a lot of onboarding in terms of when someone new jumps in. There is, of course, some automation element around it, where when people join Slack, they will get automated messages around, here's everything you need to know to get started, and here's our code of conduct, and here are the different channels you can join, and so forth. So there is a little bit of automation that happens there, but it's to ensure that we're feeding everyone the information that they need to onboard. I personally take the time every single Monday to send round a message to all the new joiners, like welcoming them in, and kind of getting everyone else to kind of help welcome them in as well. It's something that I do every single Monday, whether I'm on holiday or not. I have to make sure I do it. And then kind of jumping in, and I think having some of these one-to-one conversations makes a massive difference every now and then. So for example, if someone has shared that, they just got made redundant, let's say, or they're looking for new careers, or they need advice on something, every now and then I do try to go in and have like a one-to-one chat with someone and be like, these channels might be supportive. This is someone might be helpful for you to speak to. The other thing that probably is thankfully coming back now that wasn't in the last few years is this opportunity to see each other in person. So a good example is if a big group of us happens to be attending the same conference, we would put together like a channel for all of our members to connect with one another. And so I think that makes a big difference when it comes to personalization, because then you stop being just that person behind a Slack group or a Facebook group or so on, and they actually get to see you and meet you in person and hear you and talk to you. And I think that really, really, really helps, because we always notice like folks who get together in a specific event or conference or so on, afterwards, it's so much easier to retain them, because then they look forward to hanging out with that same group of people for the next event.
Yeah. What's the future of Women in Tech SEO then?
I know, it's scary. I don't know. Like I always say that like the absolute goal would be for the community to kind of be redundant in a way, because I mean, that's the whole purpose, right? Where right now we feel that we need that safe space because we're not getting some of that in the wider industry. So we feel like we need a safe space with a code of conduct where we can connect, help, support one another. But the hope is, in a few years' time, or I don't know for how long, that we will finally get to a point where everyone already feels motivated, supported, amplified enough for the community to no longer be needed. So I would say that's like the ultimate goal. But until then, just kind of, keep growing, keep having these amazing conversations with these amazing people, and kind of keep learning more about how to have a community that kind of helps us all be connected a lot better.
Yeah. And that is such a nice way to end today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. It was a good one, wasn't it? If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and rating of the podcast and share it with someone who may find it useful. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but in the meantime, keep up to date with Girls in Marketing over on social media and our website. We'll pop some helpful links in the description.